This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Well, technically, this is the AI-generated voice of Mark as created by 11 Labs. In today's episode, I'm offering more rambling reflections from the road, or rather, perhaps it should be called Rambling Reflections from the West, as I talk a little about attending in-person events, making time for colleagues I respect and admire, making time for my loved ones, looking at making some significant changes, and being willing to embrace change and the forthcoming adventures, even when sometimes stacking so much on my to-do list can be a bit frustrating.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 385 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I'm recording pretty crappy audio quality, I'll give you that, because I don't have my special microphone with me. I'm over in Victoria, BC, and I was limited in what I could pack with me, and my humblest apologies. I'm going to do my best to get this episode out and not make it so long so that you're not as perturbed with the audio content. But this is a reflection? Yes, it's one of those. It's a rambling reflections from the road. And the title I'm going with is Go West, Not So Young Man, because I am doing this episode from Victoria, British Columbia. But let's forego some of the regular introductory matters, such as comments from recent episodes. And I do love the comments you guys are leaving me, as well as a huge thank you to my patrons who support the podcast at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as my coffee buddies over at buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie. But yes, let's roll the bumper and let me get into my rambling reflections from this echoey hotel room. Yeah, that'd be an interesting title, wouldn't it? Okay, the first rambling reflection I want to share is World Fantasy Con. So last episode, 384, I was at World Fantasy Con, but I had recorded it kind of before most of it started. I mean, I just connected with a few people the night before, and I was recording it the morning just before everything was really going to get going for me. So I do want to reflect on just how powerful and how wonderful World Fantasy Con was. I mean, yes, it was wonderful because I was able to get to it in less than a 2-hour drive, which was fantastic. But I connected with so many people I hadn't really gotten a chance to hang out with in a while. And there were a few people that I do hang out with every once in a while, but great to see them in a different context. I saw some fellow Canadian authors that I normally see either at a conference in Calgary or in Colorado Springs. And it was so wonderful. Even if we didn't get a chance to chat more than a few words, how lovely to see them. How lovely just to know they were there and that the conference was richer for them being there. Even if I didn't get to personally benefit much from, except for the wonderful smile and greeting them, etc., or the hugs or whatever it was that came with that. But yeah, so many folks I hadn't seen in a while. And one of the things that was really pronounced for me was I used to go to a conference in Niagara Falls, New York at EerieCon, and honestly, the hotel from EerieCon was basically a block and a half away. It was so funny driving by that hotel. So many great memories of a wonderful little con, of which, I made some really good friends at EerieCon. And it was so good to see people at World Fantasy Con, because it was in the same city, a lot of people who were relatively local who went to EerieCon. And I hadn't seen, I realized, in 10 years, because the last EerieCon I went to is in the spring of 2014. And at that time, I hadn't been shaving my head and grown a beard, so I look a little bit different, but I'm still the same Ian. People did recognize me, of course. But I realized what had happened is shortly after that, ErieCon conflicted with either Hamilton Comic Con in, right where I was living in Hamilton at the time, or other conferences that I was traveling to. And so I hadn't been able to get to ErieCon. ErieCon did fold about 4 years ago, I think. So wonderful to see people that I knew from ErieCon. I mean, even just walking into the hotel and a couple people that I remember seeing at ErieCon every year was fantastic. That reconnection was great. I also got a chance to connect with some folks I knew from other conferences. And how wonderful, because at one of the other conferences that I initially connected with them at, I'm often very busy helping run things behind the scenes. So I'm bouncing around from thing to thing to thing, a little chaotic, a little out of control. So I don't really get a chance to just let loose and hang out with them. And so I had this wonderful opportunity. I also had this amazing opportunity to see one of my friends connect with an author that they're a huge fan of in a very powerful and meaningful way, where they both got to demonstrate their own phenomenal creativity that went beyond writing. And I remember watching her sitting across from someone that she was a huge fan of, and just collaborating creatively, ad hoc, and it was such a beautiful thing to see. I love being witness to that sort of magic that can happen. And that's the kind of thing that happens when you go to an in-person conference, and you get a chance to connect. I made new friends, people I didn't know going in, or I maybe had only kind of briefly met, and had a great opportunity to have meals with, or drinks with, or just long conversations with folks. I hadn't had the opportunity to do that before. So I walked away from World Fantasy Con a much, much richer man. I even had the opportunity to give a long time industry person who I didn't really know a ride to the airport. So we had an opportunity for half an hour chat in the car, which was just fantastic. Just to hear her share some of these stories. And it's not that I'm hoping that this is an agent that represents me. It's just this is a person in the industry who can share all kinds of wonderful things, and just a great person that I got a chance to connect with. So again, it's these connections that aren't necessarily because I'm hoping to leverage them in some way. They're just wonderful connections that make me feel great, and hopefully other people feel great. So again, the reconnecting, the new connections, the ongoing connections, the curation of ongoing amazing relationships, all wonderful things, World Fantasy Con. So again, if you're second guessing whether or not you want to go to something, just know that there's some great benefits I never even saw ahead of time. And yes, it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time, but that's the first reflection. So let me play the bumper and I'll get into the second one. The second reflections, I noted a single night at home between that trip and being here in Victoria. And that reflection's a little bit more about, I put a lot on my plate, and I had a lot of things to do, and personal things to do that are very important to me. I'm going to get to in the next point. But work-related things related to my personal writing, as well as commitments within the industry for Draft Digital, etc. And yeah, I stacked a lot. I have a lot going on. But I had a single night at home. So I got home from Niagara Falls, New York, and then basically had an afternoon and an evening at home, working, connecting with my house sitter, which was great, a family member, and really had a chance to connect with. So how wonderful that we got to make a meal together and kind of chat and get caught up, and I could share stories about how I used to babysit her dad when we were both younger, and so that was really kind of a cool thing. It was a single night at home, but it was a really powerful and important thing. And that led to immediately getting on a plane and heading out here to Victoria. So I'm going to roll the bumper and I'm going to get into that reflection. Actually, before I do that, I want to say that sometimes stacking my calendar in such a way allows me, yes, it can be overwhelming, and yes, I have to deal with the anxiety of that. But when I go through it, I'm just so grateful for the experience. I'm so grateful. It's sometimes stressful as I'm doing it or as I'm preparing for it, but knowing that, okay, I loaded the deck, but yeah, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got to do those things. Okay, so now roll the bumper, and then we'll get on to the third one. All right, so the third one is this personal thing, and it's being a grandfather. I'm a grandfather now. I have a granddaughter. Yesterday was her third week. She's 3 weeks old, and I got to hold her and look into her beautiful little eyes, and just adore her from up close. And I know I'm going to have lots of opportunities as she grows to be a part of that. But her parents, Emily and Jeremy, are just wonderful people. Yeah, of course I'm biased because they're my stepchildren, or Emily's my stepdaughter, and her husband Jeremy. But they're both wonderful kids, just wonderful human beings. I really enjoy spending time with them. So great to be out here and to see them in their home, and to see them sort of flourishing as parents as I knew they would. They're just incredible kids and wonderful people. And then of course holding Nora, baby Nora, just such a beautiful little baby, and so grateful that I don't feel old. I'm 55. I'm a grandfather, but I'm so grateful that I get to experience this love, this different kind of love that I have for this little person, and obviously her parents, etc. So the other element of my appreciation is I'm here in Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island, with the woman I love, and it was her birthday yesterday as well. Actually, watching Liz hold her granddaughter was just so magical, so incredible. And recognizing that I get to share this adventure with somebody who I adore so much, who I love, respect, and admire. And it's so funny. Liz really did teach me about the importance of experience and adventure over physical items and stuff like that. Even, for example, again, she doesn't want me to buy anything for her birthday. She wants an experience. She wants to do things. And again, going to a whole bunch of places yesterday after we visited with her granddaughter, and having Liz, obviously we love to go to beer places and experience. She wanted to take me to some places she had been to in Victoria. I wanted to take her to places I had been to. And again, her quest to find the best chowder, and we did on at one of the pubs that we were at yesterday. So that pausing right now to just recognize how lucky I am. So it's kind of funny. I'm gonna go back to ErieCon 2014. ErieCon 2014. My marriage had ended. I hadn't told a lot of people. I'd kept a lot of that quiet. It was new. It had happened that spring. And I was devastated. I actually didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I confided in a friend at ErieCon. She and I talked a lot about that. She let me bend her ear. I'm very grateful for that. But I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until later that year that I met Liz. And a lot of things changed for me. Not because I met Liz. I think I was ready for Liz by that time, and together we've created something truly magical. So interesting for me to be back, to go from being in a place where the last time I had been in that place, I was in one of the lowest places I had been, and then to immediately come to one of the highest places I've been, being with a woman I love, having a grand time on a new adventure with her, and the adventure of being grandparents together with her, as well as exploring a city that's going to become more important to us in the future. And with that, I'm going to play the bumper and do my next reflection. So I'm in a hotel room in Victoria, BC, and I've only been to Victoria once before. I was here in the spring of 2023. I came here to speak for a writers group and was actually staying at the same hotel I was at before. And ironically, it's pretty close to where the kids live, where Em and Jeremy live. Yeah, really funny. It's like 2 blocks away, so that worked out quite nicely. But Liz and I are here obviously to visit our granddaughter and her daughter and son-in-law, sorry, and and our baby grandchild. So that's so great. But we're also looking at, since it looks like all 3 of her daughters are going to be living on the West Coast in Canada, and our grandchild is here, it looks like we're going to be moving. We're planning a move out here. Now, my son is 20 years old, and I love Alex to death, but Alex is at that age where it's not so important to do things with dad. And that's fine. I mean, I've had the luxury and the privilege of all those teenage years where you would normally expect the child to rebel against parent. And at this point in time, it's now Alex is in school, Alex is working, Alex is busy doing Alex's own things, and dad comes secondary. And I realize I don't really see Alex all that much anymore. As much as I would love to see Alex all the time, Alex probably doesn't need to see me that much. And so I may even, who knows, I might even see Alex just as much or more if I end up moving. So that's the hardest part. The hardest part about the thought of moving from Ontario. Yes, I have a lot of great friends in Ontario, but the hardest part ultimately is being farther away from my son. So I'm still struggling and reeling with that, and I know that's going to take some time. But our other 3 daughters, the children, adult children, are going to be out here. 2 of them with their partners, and our grandchild is out here as well. And I can work anywhere as a writer, so that's important. But Liz and I are here looking at where we are interested in living, so we can be close to our grandchild and be able to help the parents, help Emily and Jeremy, with the little things, like when they're back at work and looking for support, and can somebody pick up our daughter from the daycare or from school or whatever, because she's got a cold and someone's got to take her to this appointment or whatever. Like, just being there for those little things, I think, is so important. But that relocating and the work Liz and I have had to do emotionally and just sort of logistically figuring out what this means for us, and then coming up here and looking at different places. So we took a ferry up to Salt Spring Island yesterday because we thought, well, is that an option? That looks a lovely place. I have a friend who lives there, and apparently several folks I know who are writers who are on that island as well as in Victoria too. But so interesting that we went to Salt Spring Island, drove up, took the ferry. It was wonderful. We had fun. We really enjoyed ourselves there, but we realized we ruled that out because the idea of being able to quickly get to Nora meant the ferry's not necessarily a thing. That's good. Like, it only runs at certain times, so it's not not like we can get there in an hour. So we're looking at potentially being within an hour drive of Nora, of our granddaughter. And so it was interesting to go to certain neighborhoods and places and say, no, this seemed like a neat idea, but probably not. And that's okay, because as we learn more, we change our minds and we change our ideas. And it's just kind of like I just did a presentation for a writers group who are mostly just traditionally published. And I was helping to, share some insights about indie publishing and self-publishing with them. Not to change their minds completely, because I still think that there's options for trad publishing and self-publishing, and you can have them both. but to open their minds to the possibility that it's not all one way, that there's multiple ways, there's multiple pathways as well. And it's the same thing for Liz and I with this move, is changing our minds as we learn new things about stuff. We then can make a more informed decision and changing those ideas. So, for example, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, but yesterday, as we were in a particular part of Victoria, potentially looking at different options and different alternatives to the plan. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of them, but I'm kind of surprised at the fact that we have come to a couple additional conclusions based on the experiences we've had in the locale together, as opposed to the impressions we've had being here, having only ever been here separately. She's been here a couple times before, and I've only been here once before. But having that those separate experiences and then having that experience together, and how that can even just change things, how that one person that's with you and helping see that place through both of our eyes together, how that can be really, really wonderful. And I think it's so important that we're willing to adapt as we experience things together. And I know that's going to potentially change a dozen times between now and when we ultimately move. And even the timelines are relatively flexible and open, and they're going to change. And I think being receptive to that change is important. So again, let's think about that as writers, being receptive to the change and the timelines that may not be the ones you initially had in mind. It's okay. It's okay. We can do that. I'm going to roll the bumper. I'm going to do my last sort of set of reflections here. So here I am in a hotel room by myself. Liz is with our granddaughter and the kids, having dinner with them. I had work to do. I had work to get caught up on several different things. So I had some writing stuff I had to get done. I had a presentation I did on behalf of Draft Digital to a writers group that I had to get done. And I had the podcast that I had to get done. So I have opted to spend that time solo and, miss out on the family stuff. But I'm here, it's only a few hours while I'm getting this work done, and I'll see them afterwards, or Liz and I will get together afterwards, and that's all fine. But what were my options? Not coming and missing out on all the wonderful things I've experienced? No. And again, I get home. We travel tomorrow, which is Thursday, and so I guess Thursday night or Friday, as you're listening to this episode, Friday I'm back home and back doing the things, and I have a book signing on Saturday in Hamilton at the Coles I'm so excited about. And then I have stuff going on, I think virtual stuff on Sunday. I've got the big event on the 29th at Arabella Beer Park. I have a friend, a dear friend, who I don't see enough in person, and she's making a point of coming to visit me, to come to this book event. And I'm so honored, and I'm so flattered, and I'm so touched, and I'm just so getting all verklempt here. I'm just so appreciative of good friends like that I just want to spend time with. And this is a friend that has not yet met Liz in person. So wonderful that we're going to have that experience. And then obviously, and she's going to be with us for Halloween, which will be a lot of fun. It's going to be so much fun having her, experience Halloween with Liz and I and the neighbors, etc. And then I end up dropping her off at the airport on my way to Ottawa on November 1st for CanCon, where I'm doing another wonderful conference that I haven't been to in years. Just prior to the pandemic, I'd been to a couple of them, but I remember going to CanCon with Liz when we were first together. It must have been in 2015. I think that was our first road trip where we actually traveled to Ottawa together. It was the first time we stayed together in a hotel room. Of course, I'd stayed at her place or she'd stayed at my place, but that was when we learned we travel well together. And that was another time where I learned just how truly special Liz was. and what and how much she paid attention to and attended to things that mattered a lot to me. And yeah, so interesting. So I'm going back to CanCon, and I'm doing a book event, Perfect Books on Elgin Street on the Saturday. I'm doing another event signing books related to with Back of Phoenix Books, one of the vendors at the con, and just doing some panels and presentations. Again, a little bit with Draft Digital, a little bit with myself as a writer, but just looking forward to CanCon so much. And then I can come back, and I think I'll be home for a week before I go out to Author Nation in Vegas, which I'm also so looking forward to. So many things going on. But I guess as I look at it and I think, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. Why the hell did I stack so much up? But I realized I have so much I want to do. I have so many books that I want to still do, so many things I want to attend. And I'm going to make the best of it. And I know it feels exhausting, but I know I'll be able to take a breath. But I also know I'm going to appreciate having invested this time. And in the people I get to hang out with, and in just being a part of doing something I am so privileged and so lucky that I get to do. And every time I get overwhelmed with some of the ways that I stack the things, I remind myself I am kind of living the dream here. I get to write. I get to work with other authors and help them in their writing. I am one hell of a lucky SOB. And I have to remind myself of that, because sometimes I can get overwhelmed, and sometimes I can be down on myself, and sometimes I can get frustrated, but I have to remember just how lucky it is that I get to be involved with something I'm so passionate about and I believe in so dearly, and that so many of the people that I am surrounded with, and that includes you, dear listener, so many of the people that I'm surrounded by understand and get it and get me and understand why I can be so excited and sometimes overwhelmed and filled with anxiety, etc., but also understand just how that can make me happy. Because there are probably things in your writer life that frustrate you and annoy you and get to you. But there are probably some other things that remind you of why you put up with that anxiety and that frustration, because it brings you such intense joy. And that's my final reminder to you, dear friend, is don't forget the thrill and the joy and the passion and those high moments of what it is when you're a writer and somebody's reached out to you about something you've created and how it's touched them. Makes my day every single time, whether it's a listener of the podcast who comments or mentions something that resonated with them, whether it's somebody who's read one of my books or stories or whatever it was, and that it reached out to them, that it made them feel not alone. I mean, wow, the honor, the privilege. So as you're potentially also struggling with loading your plate up and all the things that you're trying to do, don't forget those high points. Don't forget the driving force, the why. Why do you do that? Potentially you do that because really you as a storyteller, it's really ultimately about those powerful moments, or potentially even those connections that you create in your creative world. And on behalf of the people that you have touched, on behalf of the people who you've touched who haven't reached out to you, because most people won't ever, I want to just say thank you for living your creative life and being willing to put up with the anxiety and the hassle and the too many things to do in too little time. Thank you for doing that. You're making the world a much better place. And I appreciate you for doing that. And I also appreciate you for listening, particularly since I know the audio quality is pretty crappy, and my apologies on that. I will continue to try to do better for you. But I want to thank you for listening and letting me bend your ear. I hope you had some interesting reflections of your own as I was rambling on these reflections from the West, from Victoria, BC. Thank you for being a listener. As always, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. And until next week, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.